So the last time we talked about where we're putting our garden and some particulars like that, and you can find that video right here. But what if you don't have a big space for a garden? What if you just have a small space and you want to do some container gardening? That's what we're going to look at here. We're at a big box store in lovely Corinth, Mississippi, and we're going to look at some things you can use for container gardening.
Okay, so like Kyle said, you might not have enough space for a big garden, so you're going to do some container gardening, which is fine. We've done that too. A couple of things to point out: if you are going to do that, you can use like 5-gallon buckets, maybe that you already have around your house, or something similar to that. Or you can also use just pots that you would put a house plant in. So that's just something to keep in mind. A couple of things to go along with that: if you use the 5-gallon buckets, or really any container that you use, you're going to want to make sure that there is holes in it, because it needs to be able to drain. You need holes in the bottom, 4 to 6, depending on how large your pot is. And then you can always just put a little screen over that, or you can even put little pebbles in the bottom, and that will keep your soil from falling out, coming out every time that you water it. Another thing to remember is make sure that you choose the right size container for whatever it is that you're going to plant. So like your 5-gallon buckets, those are going to be great for like your tomatoes, your cucumbers, peppers, maybe some zucchini. But like a 1 to 2-gallon container, bucket or a pot, whatever you choose, that's going to be better for like your green onions and your beans, stuff like that. Also herbs, you can put all kinds of herbs in that size. The main thing to remember is the larger the better, because you have to remember, in whatever container you put it in, your roots are going to grow, and as your roots fill up that pot, then it's going to need lots of watering. So if you have a little bit bigger pot, then that's going to cut down a little bit on your watering. Just a little something that I've learned the hard way.
So we've picked our garden spot or our containers, and now we need to move on to the dirt. Now you can buy pre-mixed bagged dirt, pre-mixtures of different things for your garden. Missy and I like to mix it ourselves. We do it a third, and a third. We mix a third compost, a third peat moss, and a third perlite, and we'll mix that in our dirt, and we'll talk about those.
Okay, talking about the soil or the dirt, the compost. Now what you want your compost for is because that is going to put all kinds of good nutrients into your dirt. And then your peat moss, well, the peat moss is going to help with the moisture. It's going to contain that moisture in the dirt, in the soil around your roots where they need it. And then your perlite, I'm sorry, I probably said that wrong. I struggle with that word. And what that's important for is because if you've ever seen it, it looks like little bitty balls of styrofoam. Well, those little bitty white balls are going to get into your dirt, and they're going to cause little pockets. And that is going to cause air to be able to flow and circulate around your roots, which is very important so that you don't get a root rot.
So now let's talk about seeds. There are basically 2 kinds of seeds. I know you're thinking there's lots of different seeds. Here's what I mean. One kind is hybrid. I'm going to talk about those for just a moment. So the hybrid seeds, they're just that. They're hybrid. They've been bred to do certain things. You typically get higher yields. Here's some pros. You typically get higher yields. They're disease resistant, more uniform size, and they're quite vigorous. Some of the cons, though, is obviously they don't come back. You can't save the seeds. On a very rare occasion will a hybrid seed produce again, but even if it does, it'll only do it maybe 1 more year. Typically they will not produce again. So they cost more because you're having to purchase them every year. So those are some things about hybrid seeds. Now I'm going to let Missy tell you about the other kind.
Okay, so Kyle told you about hybrid seeds. I was just going to tell you a little bit about the heirloom seeds, which are our favorite. That's what we try to use. Sometimes it's good to maybe do a little bit of both because there's good parts to each kind of seed. But the heirloom seeds, they have some of the most beautiful, unique shapes and colors. And another thing that I love about them is that most of them have a story with them. You know, there are some seeds that are 100 years old, and so they've just been passed down and passed down, not the same seed. Of course, if you are not familiar with heirloom seeds, you're going to take the seed out of your plant, like your tomato, your pepper, whatever. You dry it and you put it up. And then that way you can take that seed and you can plant it next year, and you're going to get about the same size, type, everything as you did the year before, every year with your heirloom seed. Also, your heirloom seeds, you can't compare the flavor. Oh my gosh, if you haven't had an heirloom tomato, definitely go find you a good one and taste it. Hands down, completely different taste. So that's another definite pro on that one. Now, some of the cons is they are a little bit more, susceptible to diseases. Not that they're going to get diseased and die, not that, but you just kind of have to give them a little bit more attention because that is a possibility. Also, you're going to have a little bit lower yields on the heirlooms. They're not going to produce quite as vigorous as your hybrids will, but it is worth it. I would definitely rather have fewer that taste better, have a better flavor, than to have a ton that are tasteless. Not that all hybrids are that way, but they're just, for us, we really like the heirlooms, and it's worth a little bit of extra care to us to go ahead and go with our heirlooms. And then that way we save the seeds, and that's a big money saver, because with hybrids, a lot of times you're going to have to buy your seeds every year. With heirlooms, if you put them up correctly, you're just going to pull your baggies out.
And while Missy's looking at a bajillion different seeds, I'm checking out a place to relax.
And here's a 5-gallon bucket that we found here. You can find these just about anywhere, but as you can see, this one already has holes in it, so this is going to be really good for your drainage. You don't have to worry about anything there, but basically that's just it. And again, you can put a little screen over that or just drop you some pebbles down in there, and it'll keep your soil in there whenever you water.
So Missy talked a lot about the seeds. I talked about the hybrid seeds. She talked about the heirloom seeds. If you're going to be starting your plants from seeds, things like this are great. I've even seen folks use egg cartons and different things, little Dixie cups, the paper Dixie cups, but these work really well because they do allow water to flow through and allow the plant to breathe, and that seed can really take root and take off. And then you can just put this right in the ground. You don't have to take it out. You can, because after you water it a few times, it's going to kind of get soft anyway. It's not going to be good for another use probably. So you can just put this right in the ground and it'll decompose, and that plant will just keep going.